But in thinking about 100 years from now, where do you think this whole evolution, at least of Western Christianity, where do you think it's headed over the next century?
So here's what I'd say for people thinking about that question. The first thing I'd say is the entire human project, I think, is at an inflection point. And for us to talk about what will happen to evangelicalism or whatever is emerging from evangelicalism or Christianity or religion, we can't even talk about those things sensibly unless we talk about, I think, the bigger foment and tumult that we're in. I think we're at the end of a very long story of a way that human beings relate to the earth and to each other.
Mm.
And I think all of our religions emerged and developed to help facilitate that process of making that way of relating to the earth and each other work. And I think we're at the end of that now. And what I think is a better way to frame this is that we're at the end of a whole long chapter of human history, of Christian history, of Protestant history, of evangelical history, whatever we want to say. It's all wrapped up together. We're at the end of a chapter. The new chapter hasn't begun yet. We're in the painful, difficult, long process of an old way disintegrating and the new way taking shape. When I started writing in 1998, I thought if we could just solve a couple of these things, we could have this thing fixed in 10 or 20 years, you know. What I think now is our job is to accompany people spiritually through a very, very long and very dangerous multi-generational transition period.
Mm.
And that doesn't make the job easier, but I think it helps us be more realistic about what we're dealing with. Now, that may be so vague as to be useless, but let me just stop and see where you'd want to go from
No,
there.
no, no, no. When you say a long time, is it a couple I mean, how do we know? Is it more
Yeah.
like what the late Phyllis Tickle talks about? Are we in a 500-year kind of uh, shift? This is going to take a while.
Yeah. I think we're in a shift that's going to take generations to, and I think we will never get back to the old normal. I
Yeah.
think what will happen is a new normal will emerge, and so many of our institutions and theologies and everything else will be transformed through this. If people are interested in saying what will be a redemptive and loving and I would say Christ-like expression of faith 100 years from now, I think there will be those expressions of faith. Um, Maybe I could just, and the question of what churches will look like, I don't know. Maybe I could offer three things there are so many, but let me offer three things that I think are really in play. The first one is I think we're seeking an alternative to religious exclusivism on the one hand and a kind of relativistic religious pluralism on the other. And there's some kind of synthesis or third option there that will involve each religious tradition discovering its greatest treasures, understanding its greatest treasures, because our religions tend to not even know what our greatest treasures are. Um, but they're there, and for us to rediscover our greatest treasures, simultaneously do that, offer to share them with everybody, whatever their religion, and be willing to receive the treasures that we want to receive that are offered as gifts from other traditions. That's a possible option. Second thing I think that we're going to be dealing with is I think our notions of a patriarchal, dominating, controlling God are going to become increasingly untenable. And for that, and to the degree that people hold on to a dominating, patriarchal, controlling God, people will either become atheists or fundamentalists. I think that idea of God will tend to drive people away. And then I think new understandings of God are emerging that are much more inherent to creation and to the universe, that it's not a creator separated from creation, it's a creator in and with creation, which in some ways is where we end up in Christianity, first with the idea of Jesus as incarnation, and second with the idea of the Holy Spirit moving in creation. So that would be a second thing. And then the third thing I think is, I'll just mention, is that I think faith communities will increasingly understand themselves not on by based on a set of beliefs, but based on a set of promises that they are committed to keeping, promises that they can make and that they can keep. And instead of making demands that people believe, and then we dispense benefits of what will happen after you die, we will be saying, here is what we are committed to, in the sense, what we believe matters and is important. And as a result of that, here are the promises we can make for what we will, the spiritual formation that we will try to assist with in your life. Does that make sense?